everyone? Seth Miranda here, Last Ex Witness on all social. If you want to check out any of my work, or hit me up on Twitter. If you don't know who I am, I'm a pro photographer right here in New York. You're in my studio in Manhattan, and we are down here today because I'm going to show you some quick tips on how to make some portable, low cost, and just fun backdrops for whatever you're trying to do out there. The ones we're going to make right now are kind of really optimal for tabletop and product, but you can also use them for portraits, and I'll show you that a little later. This comes from a technique, I don't even know if you want to call it a technique, it's just a method of doing things that I definitely didn't come up with, a lot of people do. Years ago, I'm talking like the early 2000s when I used to shoot catalog, which I never want to do again. I would offer the client not only lifestyle shots on the streets, but we could do some studio looking shots on the fly. And the way we would do that was we would wallpaper plywood, and we would not only do one side and both sides, but sometimes we would do it in quarters so that we could not only flip it around for 2 different looks, but also flip it around to get 4 looks if we wanted to. And the way we would do this, shoot lifestyle, then go and find a shady area, or a shaded area, I should say, and then line up all the plywood. It would be about 5 sheets, and just shot, 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 click, 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 shot, 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 click, 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 shot, shot, shot. And then when I was on the 5th board, assistants would start flipping over the plywood, and we would walk the other way and get shot, 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 shot. So we would get 10 different looking backdrops with even flat light, but it gave the client a lot of selection. And if you're in a small environment, you don't want to get set paper that is like 9 feet wide or whatever, this is kind of a nice solution. You could also do this using V-flats, which is right over there. I have the window open because we're going to be using spray glue, so I apologize if you hear some construction or if there's a lot of reverb in my voice right now, but it's just nature of the beast. So basically what we're going to do today is, just like that V-flat is made out of foam core, so is this piece of foam core. You can get various densities and thickness. I tend to go for the 1/8 inch just because the thicker it gets, the more you crunch it when you put it inside of a C-stand, and I'll show you that as well. If you guys did not see my C-stand video, check out the link below, I'll put it there. But I think it keeps it rigid. It also is lower cost than like 1/2 inch or thicker or something like that. And it's all you really need. So what we're gonna do is take this white piece of foam core, which in its own right could be a background, right? It's white, it's nice and clean. And we're gonna use some decorative paper. Now you can use anything. I mean, gift wrap. I've ripped up dollar bin comic books. I've used pieces of yearbooks from yard sales, newspaper clippings, vintage magazines, weird ads, whatever you want to make a background out of, you can do it. The difference here is I'm just doing it with 1 sheet as opposed to like a decoupage, collage kind of effect. This is just really easy, really simple. And I find that since it's not a lot of work intense or time consuming, or even just gathering multiple materials or even repeatable, you don't tend to have to baby these backdrops. You can just kind of like treat them like disposable backdrops and beat them up a little bit, try different things on them, all different stuff that you would normally not put near a backdrop that you want to save really nice and clean, you know? That being said, if you don't know what I shoot, a lot of times it's special effects makeup, and there is fake blood and weird types of chemicals flying everywhere that could stain anything. So this is definitely a benefit for me. So this is a few bucks in foam core, and I think this is a 24 by 36. So while this can be used for tabletop, I mean, you can see I can use it as a backdrop for a person, and I'm going to show you how the lens dictates how much of this you're going to need. Well, we'll go into that later. Let's make the background first, and then we'll talk Sheila into coming out and getting in front of the lens, and we'll try them out. So first of all, I have set paper on the ground just to keep it clean. And this is 24 by 36, so I went and got 24 by 36 decorative paper. I went right to the sale bin at the art store. This was, I think, $5 in paper. So now what I'm gonna do is get one side covered, cover the other side, and have a $10 backdrop kind of. So I think it's pretty awesome. This also works really good for top-down stuff, right? So if you're doing something like food photography or doing some sort of like Etsy store type stuff, this works for that as well. But what you want to do is make sure you get it down nice and even and clean, and that's where the trick comes in. So this is the same method I would use for the Brooklyn reflector, where we put aluminum foil down on a foam core. So let me just do this, because this will be the definitive video on how to do this rather than all those shady half-ass live streams I do all the time. So you kind of want to get it lined up. This paper is like a hair bigger than the foam core, which is good. We can either leave it or we can trim it, and I'll even show you guys how to do that. The key to doing this real flat is to do it 1/2 at a time. Check it out. In between gigs years ago when I was a kid, I actually did some odd jobs like lettering trucks, and this is how we would actually vinyl letter trucks. You got some masking tape, and because this is paper, you want to find something that's really low tack, but usually masking tape, if you get it anywhere, has a really decent amount of tack to it. So to counteract that, because you don't want to rip the paper, is I get the size I want, I rip it, and you're easily going to go like 1 inch or 2 past the paper, and you're going to tape it down to whatever table you're on. But I put it on my shirt, and that eats up some lint, and that will actually take down the tack as well. And you only need enough to keep yourself anchored down. You don't need it to be an actual adhesion. So what I do is I tap it to the table, and I very, very, very lightly graze across the top, and I tape it down here. So now we have a way to lift up only half and keep the other half down while we're working on one side at a time. This will be way easier for you to glue this down. So I'm gonna use 3M Super 77. This is one of the most common and definitely one of the strongest glues that are readily available out there. There's also General 45, which is a little more industrial. You may not need that, and it's a little more expensive as well. But this stuff is really good. It's been a standard forever, and we're gonna get into this. Before you get going into this, you're gonna need something rigid though. So I guess I should have scripted this out so we do this by parts. Hopefully you're not doing this step by step with me. So I have this, which is a squeegee. I'm gonna stand up a little bit. And you can see it actually has these round parts to it that let it float on my fingers. So when I'm doing this, it's not stuck in a position and get like rigid and staggered and just really wreck the paper. You don't need this though. It is a few bucks at an art store. They're just a squeegee. However, if you're home and you're doing this on the fly or whatever, credit card, driver's license, just something that's thin, rigid, and you can, get a good squeegee down with it without having too much flex in it or being too sharp to rip the paper. That's a big thing too. So keep that in mind. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna flip this over to the side of the tape. So now we have half of it exposed. I'm gonna take my Super 77. I'm just gonna do a test spritz into the garbage. All right, so that's good. Before we do that, we want to make sure we have windows open and we are covering our faces. This has a filter in it, by the way. We all have plenty of masks these days, so just keep yourself safe. Don't breathe in glue, you friggin' mooks, okay? Hopefully you guys can still hear me nice and clear. All right, so if you're not a graffiti kid, the way you typically want to spray is spray, stop, shift down, spray, stop, shift down, spray, stop. And you want to overlap the lines a little bit. So spray, 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 spray. And that's a light dust coating. I tend to go back up that way as well. And the reason you don't want to just hold it down and just rip through it is because that's how you get uneven glue and some dense spots, and it can be really annoying. Then you just want to do a light dust on the paper. And if you want to get a really nice adhesion, you're going to give it a few seconds to just tack up. You don't want to go right away. You want to give it a little bit of time to solidify itself. So now we have glue on both sides. It's not too tacky yet. We're going to give it a couple more seconds. Remember, this is spray glue. Don't underestimate the overspray and don't underestimate the vapors. Open windows. I'm sorry you guys hear the construction, but I don't want to kill too many brain cells today for you guys, right? Sorry, you're not worth it that much. We're going to pick up the end that we just glued really softly. We don't want to rip up that masking tape. Now from the tape towards the edge, you tend to start with the squeegee on the other side of the tape because you don't want to squeegee the tape down. Don't squeegee the tape down. If you do, you're going to rip the paper, trust me, especially if it's decorative paper like this. And very slowly. No craziness here. No craziness. And look at that. So even, so nice. And what I tend to do is go the opposite way just to give it a little bit more of a tack down. Now what we can do is we can take this tape off before we damage the paper. You can even see that there's, I don't know if you guys actually can see, but
Some of the paper print is actually coming up with the tape. It's that fragile. This won't happen with all papers, obviously. If you have something that's glossier, it won't stick as easy. This is super matte and like very fibrous type paper. So not bad. Now, because we already have this glued down, guess what? We flip this over. Look, it's a blank side again. We get to do it all. We get to relive the moments, everybody. We get to do this all over again. So I'm gonna go and just spray this down. Remember, you kind of want to overlap each line. You don't want to have like dense spots and thin spots, because over time, that's when it starts bubbling and separating, or sometimes it gets gloppy and can bleed through the paper. If you get glue bleeding through the paper, it's ugly, man. It gets bad, because not only does it make dark spots or something like that, but dust and dirt and other things get stuck to those globs on the side of the paper that you're going to shoot at. So it kind of sucks. All right, so we're going to let that tack up a little bit. Again, make sure you have air circulating, have a fan on, all that type of stuff. I have an exhaust fan on over there. You can't see it, but it's on. Now what we're going to do is squeegee the other way. Now, if you're only one hand is, if you're only like a righty and you can't do both, turn it around. Just use it the other way like you just did it. But I'm going to use my left hand because I'm a baller. No, I'm just kidding. I've just done this so long, so many times. It doesn't matter what hand I do it with, because you couldn't choose to flip the van around when I had to letter those vehicles, right? All those trucks, I had to learn how to do this with both hands. There was no, just flip it around. It'll be the same. All right, so we have a really nice clean, this is probably stuck to the plastic I have on the table now. Yeah, it is. But you see how even that is? Really nice and even. Of course, you're gonna wanna let it settle. You're gonna want the glue to like do what it's gonna do and evaporate and all that kind of stuff, so that it makes a good adhesion before you do anything, especially if you're throwing hot lights at it, tungsten lights or constant lights of any kind. You do not wanna go right into it, because the heat will actually stop the glue from settling in really nice and tight, and it could cause more separation over time. So just don't go, don't go crazy, let it settle, let it move in, Now, let's say you're using something that has like more of a vinyl base to it. It's not a paper, and you get air bubbles, because paper is actually porous. It will actually let the air escape through it if there is like an air bubble type situation. If it's something like a vinyl or something like that, and you get air bubbles, you're just gonna take a little needle and poke it, and then just smooth out the bubble. That's it. I mean, that's as easy as it gets. Now, as far as the overhang, because if I do this, you guys can see how much bigger it is than the foam core, right? Well, anybody out there who has ever gripped up a skate deck knows exactly what I'm gonna do right now. Of course, this is after you let it settle. Don't do it right away. But to help you along, do yourself a favor and just squeegee the edge of the board down. And when you do that, you make a weak, a thinner spot in the paper, and it'll actually help you trim this down. You see how you get like a definitive line when you do this? You guys see that? I can't even tell. I need a camera guy. And we're just gonna help it along. And now I'm gonna take out a blade. You're gonna wanna use like an X-Acto knife. I'm gonna use this pocket scalpel I always carry on me. It's an autopsy blade, a 60 XT size blade. And what you're gonna do is you're going to, right on the edge, pierce through, and you're just going to kind of do like a light saw down. Sometimes you can just like run it through, no problem. But this is a very, very like fibery paper. Like there's actually like lint coming off of it. But you want to be very careful with this. You don't want to cut yourself, obviously. I don't want to be the reason you guys cut yourself, believe me. And you just get a nice clean edge. You can clean up any weird spots that you get, which could happen, Or you can just get paper that's not even the whole size of the foam core, but if you do that, the overspray from the glue will still be on the board and you're gonna get stuck to it. So I always tell people, get the paper to be bigger than the board itself. And if it's not, try to get more than one sheet of the paper so you can just double it up. You're gonna wanna cover the board as much as possible.
And there you go. Really nice and clean edges, really nice and flat. Look at that. Look at how nice that is. Look at that. Hey, there's even a cool shot right here, right? Huh? Huh? Hey, how you doing? How you doing? So that's cool. We got one side. How about we do another side? And then what I'll do is I'll call up Sheila, get her out of bed and ask her to be like, can you jump in front of the lens so I can show this off? And we'll talk about how to either manage this lighting-wise or with what lenses too, because the lens is gonna matter when you have a background this small for a portrait. So let's do this. I found this other piece of paper, so I'll have like a red side and a blue side. Ooh. All right, so I guess Seth just click this into a time lapse. All right, so that is a double-sided board. I have to trim this side, but I'll do that, you know, whatever. We have red and we have the blue, all nice and flat. Hey, and a quick pro tip to anybody who buys spray glue, if you know, I think a lot of us know this, but it does go without saying, when you're done with the spray glue, or if you're gonna leave it sit for a little bit, hold it upside down and just spray it into a garbage or outside or whatever, and just clear out the nozzle. Because I think everybody can relate to spending a bunch of money on spray glue, and then the whole thing is clogged up to death the next time you go to use it, and you only use about this much, and you're like, what? So do yourself a favor and just clear that nozzle out for you. All right, I'm gonna trim this up. Then how about we grip it up and we shoot it with Sheila, and we'll see just what really affects this as far as lens goes, and what we can do as far as positioning this to the model. Like, do we put them right up against it? Do we put it a little bit farther away? And don't forget, you can just do this right to a V flat and it stands up on its own. Right there, V flat, just sitting up on its own. So you can totally get this done and have a freestanding background wherever you want. Even if you already own a V flat and you're like, you know what, I never used the white side or the black side of this. This is something you can do to make a background that can stand on its own almost anywhere. And V flat world makes foldable V flats. You've seen that in my soundboard video. I'll put that link down below. And they make it really easy for you to have a V flat that doesn't take up so much space that you can store somewhere. So consider that. And yeah, all right, let's get Sheila in here and let's see what we can do as far as the position of this to our model, using one light, using multiple lights, or just the lens selection as far as the compression of the background. Let's go jump into that. All right, so we made our backdrop and I got Sheila to come hang out with us, and we're just gonna take some shots. What? Okay, all right, so she just woke up, her eyes might be a little puffy. We don't put bad comments about that, right? We're good, okay, all right. Well, thank you for joining us. We are going to use this backdrop we just made with Sheila. So how are we gonna grip this up? There's a bunch of different ways for us to do this. And one of them is either you can just tape it to a wall or staple it or whatever. I've seen people even put Velcro on them and snap them to walls. But we got a double-sided backdrop here. And if we're in a studio, we can use a C-stand to do that. And if you haven't seen already, I have a C-stand video that shows this as well, but we'll get into it here. So when you have a knuckle, one of the best things you can do is loosen this up and put the foam core right here, not here, because this will put a bite on your board and it'll start wrecking it. Here, it may squish it, but at least it won't be putting like dents and full on like bites into the board. So here's what we're gonna do. We are going to stretch this out over the high leg. Remember, whenever an arm goes out, we put it over the high leg. Now we have an option here. We can either go vertical or horizontal. Now, first of all, I think I'm gonna actually go with the blue, just cause, why not? And I'm actually think I'm gonna start with the vertical, but obviously you're gonna do this however you see fit. I find with the horizontal, while it is nice to get some horizontal portraits, you're really limited as far as any sort of angle up or angle down or anything. So I tend to go with the vertical. And this also takes me back to those days when I was using plywood for this. And also, if you're gonna do this with a V-flat, odds are it's going to be vertical anyway. So let's do it in a vertical formation. I'm gonna open up this knuckle and we're going to go right to the flat part, right in the middle. And I'm just going to close down, but I'm gonna go kind of soft. I'm not gonna really crush it. I just need it to get snug in there. And you want it to be as square as possible. Now, all you need is a nice little A-clamp. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna use this all black one so it's not so unsightly if it gets in the frame. And we're just gonna boop right there onto the arm. And so we have a whole stable board. We can even pivot it one way or the other if we wanna change the reflection we're getting on this type of paper, as you can see it in the video. But I'm going to put it as square as I can because that's kind of the best starting point, is you know how the board's gonna act, you know how the substrate's going to reflect. Now we're gonna put it right behind Sheila. Now, Sheila is relatively tall, so I'm 6'1", she's about 6 feet, I'd say. You don't really want to set the background so it's like even with your subject's head. You want to treat it like it's a background, like as if you hung some paper. So we're going to go a little higher than that. And the way I go, like as a good rule of thumb, is the bottom of a board this size, just a board this size, is middle of the spine, kind of like right below the shoulder blades, is where I put the bottom of the board so that I can kind of shoot up. Actually, it's kind of a little too tall. There we go. So I can, this way, if you're gonna do any type of beauty shot up, you have that ability. Now, the other thing is how close we put it to her and how square. You wanna get as square as possible. The reason that is, if you're going to light forward, like we are right now with this beauty dish, you want it to hit kind of flat. You don't want it to go from one side of the board to the other and have inverse square happen where the board gets bright and gradates to dark, unless you want that effect. But let's start off super square as we can. And before I even take a shot, why don't we just do this with the natural light? Because one of the easiest things you can possibly do before you even do something like this is just have the board here, face your model with the windows lighting your model. The closer we go, like my back would be to the windows, I'd have Sheila, then the board, and I would just click, 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 click. You've seen a lot of headshots like that, right? Just window light. And some people in this that are watching this might just do window light. So that's totally an option. Why don't I just do that now? It just won't be flat light. It'll be coming from her right side. So let's get my Nikon Z6 II right here. I have a 24-120 f4 lens on it. Now, the length of the lens will actually impact this backdrop because it's such a small backdrop. The longer that lens is, the more leeway you have as far as that backdrop filling the space. I'm not gonna get into a debate about this. It's not really compressing the space, it's just a perspective. And because it's such a long lens relative to how close I am to Sheila, the background appears to be larger. So let's take a shot in just ambient light, see what I'm even getting as an exposure. So I can open up all the way, F4, and it looks like I'm gonna slow my shutter down to 100th, and I'm at ISO 100, and boom. Let's take a look. You get this this really flat light because we're just using the window light, but it's a very like wishy, dreamy type backdrop because it's such a busy backdrop with a shallow depth of field, right? But I'm not really digging the way the light looks on her, but you might like that natural look, or you could change the position of Sheila and the background to the windows if you want to do natural light like that. However, I already have this beauty dish set up, so we're gonna use it, guys. And what I'm gonna do is eliminate all the light in the space, including the light that's filming me right now and the window light that's ever changing in this room. I'm sorry if this video looks a little jumpy from the light changing so much. We're gonna close down to F8. We're gonna speed up our shutter speed, and we're gonna get a black frame going on from this mirrorless camera. What a marvel of technology. So it's reading as a black frame. Put the trigger on, lock it down, go into TTL, and let's get a shot with the strobe only. And let's take a look. And now you're seeing the difference we're getting here is a strobe that keeps everything nice and tight. A closed down aperture gives us more of the background, right? Like we actually have the background showing some definition as opposed to over here. Of course, there is gonna be a color tone difference. The warmth of what's happening here now as I'm getting into golden hour because the day is ending, but that is pure clean light and a nice tight backdrop. I'm also shooting at 120 millimeters, which is causing that background to fill the space. If I stood at the same spot and I zoomed out to, let's say, I don't know, let's go 50 millimeters, you'll see how much it doesn't fill up. The background obviously is gonna start showing the knuckle over here, right? And the edge of it. You might even like that look. I mean, it's up to you guys, but to me, it's kind of the illusion is kind of getting that backdrop going. So depending on how close you put it to her, will also dictate how much of the zone that they're in is part of the exposure. What do I mean? I know, relax, breathe. Think of it this way. I'm shooting Sheila with this light. Therefore, my exposure is primarily on Sheila. Since this board is about 10 inches away from her back, they're technically within the same zone. And that's why the exposure is kind of the same on these shots so far. But what happens if I move it farther away? Well, if I do that, we're now separating them into two different zones here. She is roughly 2.5 feet from this beauty dish. Now, instead of a few inches, she's about, I'm gonna say 2.5, 3 feet away from the backdrop. But the backdrop is easily 6 feet away from the light. So if she's in exposure for f8, odds are over here, it's probably a couple stops away, maybe, give or take. Let's take a look at what we get. It's going to be underexposed. I'm telling you that guy right now, guys. I'm going to stretch my lens out as far as it goes, 120. I'm going to focus on Sheila's beautiful, beautiful eyes. And let's take a shot. Boom, you see that? So here's where it was. That's where we are. And this is all because of the distance, right? This also limits how much of that background is even in the shot. So if I was to go back to my 50 millimeter where we were before, you obviously will see the whole background setup. If you wanted that, it's there too if you want that kind of a shot. But you guys see what's happening here, right? So it's not just a matter of the perspective of the lens filling the background, but it's also a matter of if I'm using a single light, it affects the exposure on that background. You could easily throw in another light. Why don't we do that? This is a ProPhoto B10. I'm just going to drop it pretty low and then just pitch it up towards this backdrop. We'll put it into a separate group because they're separate zones. And we will start it off relatively low. Now, why would I do this? Well, the reason I would do this is instead of worrying about the distance games I'm playing, I can actually control the whole exposure of that background based on what I set that light to, or I can even gel that light and change the color of that background completely. All right, so we want to make sure that background is square to everybody, right? To the light, to Sheila. Let's take a look at what this is going to look like. I'm not even going to meter that light. I'm not even going to TTL it. I'm just going for it. I don't know. We're crazy. We're crazy over here. But it'll be a totally different effect. And you can actually see how much that light blew out, right? So if I go into that light and I drop it down like 2.5 stops, just so it's something that's there, you'll see that we get this gradation pattern now. So now we have a gradated background, which is really nice to have sometimes. Remember, this is what it looked like before, and then this is what it looked like right up against Sheila. So you can actually see that you go from this nice flat look with a sharper background, you can go into a more subdued, darker background, or you can even have a gradated background from the strobe we put in for the background, should you want it. Now, let's throw another wrench at this one. Why don't we throw a gel on that light back there? And probably what's gonna happen is it'll only affect the gold leaf or whatever that is on there. But hey, why not? And just to get a really stark difference, I just chucked a red gel on there. Let's just see what the red looks like. It's probably not gonna look that great, but you'll see what the gel is actually doing. So once again, stretching out to 120 mil. And now we have this bleed of red going to neutral, but we could also keep on refining that and move the light. So, okay, wow. This is going way longer than I thought it was, but I'm kind of hoping you're getting this is the vibe of the channel, is that I can show you a bunch of ABC stuff, or we can kind of keep on going on a tangent, which if you guys like tangents, stick with the video. If not, you're free to just stop watching at any time. I'm going to pull this light right back to Sheila, and I'm going to pitch it upward even more. Actually, you know what? I'm not even gonna pitch it upward. I'm just gonna boost it higher and put it right behind her shoulder blades. And that'll put it more in line with the background. So here's what I'm doing. I'm basically making the spread of that background light go wider so it covers more area on the board. So when I shoot this, it's not just a little bit of a glow, it's more of a gradated glow, a little more even on our background. Yeah, let's take a shot at this. And you can see how it starts creeping up, right? So we were here and then we go to here just from moving the light closer to Sheila, then closer to the backdrop. Closer to the backdrop, less spread of light, more centralized. Closer to Sheila, covers the background more. I mean, like we could even go, just do one more. I know. I appreciate you helping me out, all right? Relax. Thank you. Thank you. We're okay, I'm recording. Stop. All right. So what I can do is even move this light a little taller and pitch this light a little more up. And what that does is it gives me a little more room to shoot down instead of up. And when we do that, we get more of an even coverage of the red. And you can see that it creeps up even further and you can actually even this out totally. How would I do that? Fine, let's end this video with an even red gradation, all right? How would I do that? Simple. I'm gonna move this background a little more because moving the background farther away is the same as moving that light farther from it, right? So I just have to make sure we're all squared up again. And I am going to stretch out this lens again. And now you can see that it's like really kind of creeping up there. So remember guys, we started out with daylight, which was golden hour getting warm on me at f4 with this soft bokeh background kind of a thing. Then we went to f8 where we got a sharper background and a more defined Sheila with the strobe and more neutral colored light with the strobe. You can see how much she leaned whiter with that. Then what we did was we moved that background back and we got the soft, the bokeh again from the distance of her to the background, which I hate saying that word, but whatever. You get what I mean. The out of focus area gets a little softer over here. Then what we did was we put in a backlight to bring back up the exposure, but keep that soft focus on the background. Then we threw a gel on that background to give it some kind of whatever, I don't know. And then we decided to make that background as even as we kind of could. I probably could even go even further, but this video is going way too long as it is. But you get my point. The whole thing here is distance. I don't know what to go. I don't know what to tell you guys. What did this video start out as? A portable temporary background or whatever? That was a few bucks in decorative paper, some spray glue, and a piece of foam core, and we're able to do all this different stuff just from the principles, right? So I'm hoping, oh, this light is all weird now. Yeah, that's better, I guess. Maybe? Nah, not even. Just the principles of knowing what we're trying to do or what light will do if we change something can give us so many more options and variables to the shots. And that also means that Sheila can walk out of this studio with more than just what she asked for or thought she was gonna get. And it didn't take us any extra time if we knew, oh, if we move the light farther off the background, well, obviously it'll spread more. If we move the background from her, we know it'll get darker. If we wanna make it brighter, but still have the depth of field, well, we can close down, but we have to actually move the background farther away from her to then compensate for closing down the aperture, so there's all these different things. And the reason we closed down was to get rid of all the daylight that's dying on me right now and probably making this video look ridiculous. Anyway, all this stuff is core principles. And I hope you guys understand that when you guys say, hey, what is the power of that light set to or whatever, that means nothing. It's about why. It's about what happens if we do this. If we do this, what happens with that, right? So that background right there, you can get a bunch of different looks out of it just purely from playing with distance and your aperture, right? The length of your lens can make a big difference here as well. Of course, the length of the lens also affects your subject, right? You go too wide or you go wider rather, their features can start to look a little different. You go longer, their features start to look a little different as well. I don't know if this was helpful. I know I just went off on a total tangent. I did not expect this video to go that way, but I tend to go live more than I do edited stuff. And I would hope that when I do edited stuff like this, we can kind of go in a live format and be like, oh, this is pretty cool as well. And you can kind of see the in-between shots. I'm not into like, hey, look, click, it's done and it's awesome, yay. hey, you know. So anyway, I want to thank Sheila for hanging out with me today and getting out of bed to help me out with this shot. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, hit me with a comment down below. I'll do my best to answer them. You know, I think this is just like a really fun thing for you to try out. It's a good thing to have on hand, especially if you do top downs, tabletop photography, maybe even like anything small. You have Etsy store, product stuff. It's a really fun little thing to do. And if you want to do portraits, you can really get into it as well with this kind of deal going on right here. All right. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys did like this, please hit like. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit subscribe, plus the bell to be notified when I drop new videos. I'm trying to do them as regular as I can. You know, follow me at Last X Witness on all social. You can check out my work at Instagram, Last X Witness. Join me on Twitter and for some discussion, or live on Twitch with my photo community. And yeah, I know I'm just dragging this one out. We'll get dinner. All right, I promise. All right, pick a place. Pick a place. Anyway. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Later.